All right, hello everybody. We're going to be filling out those notes that we glued in yesterday. And as you fill out these notes, you're going to be answering some questions on the said puzzle. You are going to need some coloring supplies and, of course, headphones to listen to the video. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to color that map that's at the top left-hand part of your notes, just like it is on the screen. Pay special attention to this area in purple. This is the area we're going to be looking at today. It is called Sumer. It is the very first civilization ever that we know about anyway. And it is the very first civilization ever in this Mesopotamia area that we're going to talk about. It is one of the 4 civilizations we're going to talk about. It is the only one that does not become an empire, though. So Sumer started in 3500 BCE, and it was unique in that it was made up of city-states, and each city-state was independent. It had its own king, its own government, its own laws, its own military. It included the main city that had the big buildings, as well as the farmland around it. By 3000 BCE, the Sumerians founded 12 city-states, including Ur and Uruk. If you need to pause the video at any time, go ahead and pause it so you can catch up with your notes. Their government, like I said, consisted of kings. Each city-state had its own king, and they became king through hereditary measures, meaning if your father was king, then the oldest son became king, and that oldest son, once he became king, then the next oldest son would be king, and so on. The king was also the head of the military. He was also the highest priest, so he represented the city-state's god, because each city-state had their own head god. The king enforced the law, led all the armies, and he hired the scribes to collect the taxes and keep records. So scribes became pretty important. In the city-state, they had these buildings called ziggurats, which were temples that were dedicated to the city-state's god. Ziggurats are pyramid-like structures. They were surrounded by steep terraces and included a staircase that went up to the top. Only priests and priestesses were allowed to go inside the ziggurat, and they were made of sun-dried brick and decorated with colorful tiles. Now, they were made with brick because in this region they had very few trees and stones, so buildings were made out of clay bricks. And next to these ziggurats, they had marketplaces, also known as bazaars. And each city-state had their own marketplace. Each city-state pretty much followed the same religion. They were polytheistic, which meant that they believed in multiple gods and goddesses. They believed their gods controlled specific natural forces, like the sun and rain. So they might have a god of the sun and a god of the rain, and they believed that if the sun came out that day, the god of the sun was the reason the sun came out that day. They also believed that when the gods were angry, the gods would cause floods and famines. The highest god for all of the Sumerians was the god An, and he was the one that controlled the seasons. He controlled whether it was hot in the summer and cold in the winter. Each city-state claimed one of the gods as their own, and they would dedicate their ziggurat to that specific god. Sumerians believed that their gods were responsible for everything that happened in their lives, good, bad, or ugly. It was because of the gods. So that means that it was important for the Sumerian people to keep their gods and goddesses happy. Because if the gods and goddesses were happy, good things happened. Don't worry about that time to climb thing. They also had social classes in Sumer. The highest class consisted of the ruling family, which was like the king, the queen, the kids. It also consisted of high-ranking government officials and the head priests. In the middle class, they had lower-ranking priests and government officials, as well as merchants, which are people that sold things, and artisans, which are people that made like pottery and clothing. The lowest class consisted of the farmers, and these were people that worked in the fields that belonged to the king and or the priest. So nobody owned their own land. The king or the priest owned the land that the farmers then worked on. And then below the farmers were the slaves. These were usually people that had been captured during war, but some were Sumerians who became a slave to pay off their debts. In Sumer, law regulated family life. Men had authority over children and wives and could sell them into slavery. Men also, if they wanted to, could easily divorce their wives. Women, on the other hand, had a harder time if they wanted to divorce, but women could buy, own, and sell property, as well as operate their own business, which was pretty unique for women to have that kind of power back then. Trade was a very important thing for the Sumerian city-states. It helped make all their city-states wealthy. And with trade came this thing called cultural diffusion, which means that people from other cultures were coming and trading with people in new cultures, and then they started to mix their cultures together. It's kind of like how America works. We have lots of different cultures that we've kind of mixed together and made our own culture. The Sumerians were the first people to write things down. They developed a writing system called cuneiform. When it was first created, each symbol represented a specific word. So if they were talking about a bird, they would write the symbol for bird. They would not have 4 different symbols for B-I-R-D. It would all be one symbol for that one word. The Sumerians did not use any paper. They used wet clay to write on with a sharp reed, which is basically like a hollowed out stick. And then they preserved that tablet by drying it. Cuneiform was taught at their schools, and that's where the people learned to be scribes. Scribes were the people that knew how to read and write cuneiform. They were very important and rose to high government positions because they knew how to read and write. The story of Gilgamesh was believed to be the oldest written poem in the world. It was originally passed down orally, which means like your grandma would be sitting you down and telling you a story, and then you would tell your kids that story you heard, and they would tell their kids, and it was just passed down by word of mouth. But eventually it was written down. It was about the heroic deeds performed by Gilgamesh, who was a king of Uruk, but he was also part god. It is possibly the oldest epic poem in the world, and that's why it's so significant. It's because we believe it is the oldest poem in the world. The Sumerians created many different inventions and had many different discoveries, some of which we still use today. For example, they created the wagon wheel, which is eventually how we get to a car wheel. They created the arch. And if you have an arch in your house, you can thank the Sumerians for figuring that out. They created the potter's wheel. They created the sundial and a 12-month calendar. They also, which is the most important, figured out that if you mix copper and tin together, it creates bronze. And bronze is a much stronger material than what they had been previously using, which was stone, clay, or copper and tin. They also had a number system based on the number 6. They divided an hour into 60 minutes, and they divided a circle into 360 degrees. They also studied the sky, and they recorded the paths of the planets and the stars. So with the invention of bronze, we move out of the Stone Age. Remember when the Stone Age is when they made everything out of stone, and we move into the Bronze Age because now they're going to start making all their weapons and their tools out of bronze. So for the rest of class, you're going to be working on workbook questions 89 to 95. It's homework if it's not done in class. You may work with a partner. I wanted to show you the questions on page 90 because they are kind of confusing. So on page 90, there's a chart. If I go back to it, that in the last classes people were pretty confused on. Great. So this chart looks like this. And I'm actually going to show you how to do this chart. So you're going to use page 89 to help you. On page 89, they have these 3 boxes, and each section talks about a different thing: irrigation, production of tools, use of animals. And you're going to use each of those boxes to fill out each row in this problem solution results chart. So in that first section of irrigation, their big problem they had was they only had a small amount of land that had access to water and could be farmed. So how they fixed it, what they had to do to fix it, oh my, there we go. The Sumerians built irrigation canals to bring water to crops. And as a result, farmers could now use more land to grow more crops. So you're going to do that for the next 2 rows. One of those rows should be about the production of tools, and another one should be about the use of animals. The rest of the questions are pretty self-explanatory. This key concept checkpoint, give it a try. I'm just going to check that you tried it, and then we'll go over it on Monday. On page 92, you don't really have to do anything, but you are going to need the information to answer the first 3 questions on page 93. You do not have to do the math problem on the bottom of page 93. You're going to use these, 5 paragraphs to answer these bottom 3 questions. And then finally, you are going to use this reading to answer these questions here. So what you're going to basically do, because they're not asking you specific questions, they just want you to give examples from the text. So number 1, it says the Sumerian people specialized in different trades. So you're just going to go in the text and prove that that's true, basically. And you can put that people are doing skilled trades such as making jewelry, metal tools, clay pots, and rugs. And you can see it talks about that right there in the passage. Let's see. Right here in this paragraph, they talk about selling goods. Some merchants are trading food, tools, clothing, other crafts. You're going to do the same thing for 2, 3, and 4. The ziggurats served many important purposes in Sumerian life. What were those purposes, basically? If you have any questions, I'll leave the answer key with your sub, which I believe should be Mrs. Sakaric. Otherwise, you can also email me. Whatever you don't finish is homework over the weekend, and I will be checking on Monday. You get your homework done, you get candy. You don't get your homework done, you get a check and no candy. So I'll see you all on Monday.